Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everyone to this Revolutionize Your Retirement interview with experts call. I'm Dorian Mintzer. I'm owner of Revolutionize Retirement and host for this series. So today I am so delighted that I have two guests with me who are both pioneers in the conscious eldering movement. And our focus today, the title is really Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, Embrace and Savor Your Next Chapter. So let me tell you a little about our two guests, and then what will be happening in the course of this interview is I'll be asking some questions, I'll be integrating some of the questions you have, and Ron and John will be talking with each other. So let me tell you a little about both of them. John Sorensen has 40 years plus experience in engineering design, corporate management, and entrepreneurial experiences. He now uses this experience to fulfill his calling as an environment activist and community organizer in transforming our culture to one that encompasses the wisdom and caring of the conscious elder. He envisioned and founded Conscious Elder Network, which is consciouselders.org, and his background includes the following. It's a really fascinating background. His early career was devoted to spacecraft and rocket engineering, which included the astronaut moon landing. He founded and led a transportation technology incubator company for 20 years. He promoted and raised funds for a Vietnam microloan program benefiting 75 war victim families. He's currently supporting home, school, and abuse shelter building projects in Nepal and 5 other Southeast Asia countries. And he's a passionate supporter of startup ventures directed at healthy food consumption, sustainable living, and inner growth. So you can just hear from this incredible background the activist, forward-thinking, leading-edge person that John is. And I'm so delighted that you're with us today, John. Let me tell you a little about Ron. Ron Pevny is a life coach, a certified saging leader, and we'll learn about what that is as the call goes on, and a longtime rite of passage guide who for many years has offered wilderness quests, retreats, and other support services for people and organizations in transition. He's founding director of the Center for Conscious Eldering and has been offering Choosing Conscious Elderhood retreats to serve as rites of passage into conscious elderhood. And those started around 2002. He's also the creator and administrator of the 12-organization Conscious Aging Alliance. Ron is author of a book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, and the website, which is eldering.com. Both of these wonderful men are pioneers in this field of conscious eldering. And when you think about it, in our society, older people, elders, aren't revered in the same way that they are in other cultures. And I think these two men and other people involved in this are really trying to help change that because, as all of you on the call know, or many of you, ours is an aging population. And by 2030, it's going to be a fourth of the population. Ron, let me just turn to you first. I think it would probably be helpful if you just tell us what conscious eldering is, because a lot of people don't really understand that term. And also, how is it different from conscious aging, positive aging, successful aging, healthy aging, all these other terms that we use and that are approaches to aging well? Let's start with you, if you would, and just help us understand what the term and concept's all about.
Okay, I'm happy to, Dory. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a privilege to be able to share this time with you today. Conscious eldering is both a vision for what is possible as we age and pass. And it's an empowering vision of the vast potential that we humans have for aging with purpose, passion, and continual growth, and service to our communities and our planet. And it's a path that provides a set of understanding and practices that can help us grow to meet our potential. And as I see it, conscious eldering goes beyond positive aging and healthy aging, successful aging. There are a lot of different names, different models for aging well. And all of those models, I believe, are critically important. They really help to empower us as we age in a culture that doesn't pretty much sees older adults as irrelevant. But conscious eldering goes beyond those in that it offers a goal and a role to work toward in this modern world where there's generally no defined and honored role for older adults. And that role to work toward is the role of elder, and a role that throughout human history has been honored as critical for the well-being of societies and of their older members. And we know that modern culture has no role for the elder, but elderhood is an archetypal dynamic in our human psyche that seeks expression nonetheless, whether our society has a role for it or not. And it's an inner state of growth that isn't reached just by getting gray hair and wrinkles, but rather by conscious preparation. And so this path of conscious eldering, this preparation, involves both inner emotional and spiritual work, and it involves a commitment to using one's wholeness and wisdom, which are the fruits of this inner work, in service to the community and to future generations. And so it's a path that really involves inner work and inner growth, and it involves the commitment to really serving as an elder to help make a difference in this world that we live in.
That's really helpful to hear that. And John, do you want to add a little more of any thoughts you have on this stage of life of elderhood from your perspective of elderhood and conscious eldering?
I think Ron did an excellent job of summarizing what it means and what a conscious elder is and what it's about. What I would say is one of the things that we all realize, and when we go on these journeys, is that you never get there. In other words, you don't get to a point and say, okay, I am now a conscious elder. Consciousness is something that we continually work for or work toward, because we always have something new to learn about what it means to be a conscious person. And the other thing I would say, just to say in maybe different words, what Ron just said, is that while we do our inner work, while we're doing our outer activism, we continue to do our inner work. So it's a parallel thing. In other words, there's both an inner and outer element to it.
Which, when I spoke with both John and Ron last week, we were talking, and a lot of our conversation today is going to be about the inner work and the outer work, because I think sometimes we forget that that the inner work is so important, but that we really do have a role as we get older of thinking about the advocacy and the outer work too. So we're going to be talking about both. But what do each of you see as the difference about being old and being an elder? Ron, do you want to weigh in on that first?
I guess I would say, Dory, that first, I believe that every older person certainly deserves great respect. And there's not a whole lot of respect, I think, given to older people in the world we live in these days. But all that being old really, I think, implies is that one has lived a bunch of years and had a bunch of experiences. But being an elder really implies and entails mining our experiences, mining our years of experience to really see what wisdom we have gained. It very much implies being willing to consciously look at the lives we've lived to see who this person is that we're taking into old age. Because we all know the old adage that wherever you go, there you are. As we go into our older years, who are we? What gifts do we bring forth with us? But what baggage do we need to let go of so that we can really move forward without being held back by a whole lot of old baggage? Where is forgiveness needed? Where is some work to process old grief needed? Where do we need to reframe various disempowering stories that we've come to tell ourselves throughout our lives? And we all accumulate these because we've all suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Where do we need to heal, and what do we need to do to become as whole as possible, that as we move into our older years, we can really let our elder gifts shine forward? And I think it's the commitment to consciously look at our lives, clean up the past, and get in touch with our deepest, most soul-felt visions for who we can be for the future, all of those comprise this journey toward conscious elderhood. And many people who are just getting old are not approaching any of this consciously at all. They're just gradually drifting without a lot of intentionality or consciousness into their older years. And in doing so, whether they are aware of it or not, denying themselves some incredible opportunity for what their older years can be for them.
So it really sounds, which makes sense, that you're really talking about kind of the aging with intention, or bringing our intentions more clearly into the focus as we age, and that's a big part of the difference between being old and being an elder. That anybody just can accumulate years, but it's what you do with the years and how do you make sense of your life and your connection in the world that sort of makes the difference.
That's right. And I know that I would just say briefly, Doris, I went for my annual physical recently and was talking to my doc, and he was asking me what I'm doing these days. And I told him about my conscious elderhood work. And he said, Ron, so many of my patients are people who are nearing retirement age or beyond retirement age. And he said, this is him talking, he said, my perception is that they are just in a holding pattern. It's like they feel that their best years are behind them and they're just in a holding pattern, just holding there, trying to hang on as best they can to whatever was good about their lives, but without any real goals, without any real clear purpose. And he felt that was sad, and I feel that's sad when I know that so much more is possible.
John, what thoughts? And I know you've devoted this next stage of your life to this conscious elderhood too. What's your sense on what it is that helps people shift from just accumulating years to aging more consciously and being more intentional?
Dory, that's an excellent question. We live in a culture where the common model that I think many people in their mid-careers, if you will, say, I can't wait till I retire so I can go to a retirement community and play shuffleboard or cards or golf or something. That idea that once we hit something called retirement, we can now play again. And it's in our culture. That's what the expectation is, or that's what if we're successful in life, we get to do that. And it's part of the need to shift our culture, that we can see that this phase of life called elderhood is we are in a point of reinventing what it means to be an elder. And I know for me, if I look at my own path and using Ron's description of being consciously or intentionally looking at where am I now, what's all this old baggage that I'm carrying around, how is it interfering with both what I do and what I think about, and by cleaning that up, really looking at it, cleaning it up, and then from that, I can just say I went from when I left working for a paycheck, I started a process of really cleaning up myself psychologically, and then that led me personally to wanting to develop a spiritual life, and then that led me to saying I have been given so much, I really want to give back in a meaningful way. And now that I'm in the process of developing a way to do that, I'm finding this is extremely rewarding. It's much more rewarding to me to be in this mode of thinking and acting than it would be off playing cards somewhere or something like that. I feel really fortunate to have come to this. But when I look at society as a whole, I think it's the culture that sets us up the way we do.
Which that is probably the problem we all hit our heads against so much, that this term elder is generally not seen as positive in today's world. How do you think we can begin to think about the term in a different, how do you think we can educate people about seeing elderhood as something that's a good thing? It's something that you mentioned, just your own sense of that giving back and that sense of being part of something larger. What are ways to just help educate ourselves and others that getting older really has some good parts to it in these respects? Your own story is such a helpful one. And other thoughts on it, or Ron, from your vantage point?
I definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dory. Yeah, I definitely believe that the elder is a term and elderhood are terms that need redefining. But I think what's really positive is that there is a growing number of people, I know certainly the kind of people who come to our Choosing Conscious Elderhood retreats and workshops, for whom I said that's an archetypal energy in us. These people say that something about the word elder just rings for them in a beautiful way. It stirs something deep in them. They know it's what they want to aspire to, and they don't have much clarity. We're all trying to gain clarity on what that could mean in today's world. But that word does have a certain attraction for an increasing number of people. In fact, I was reading, what was it, in USA Today or something the other day about this whole issue that we're all dealing with of what do we call the stage of life after retirement age, and everybody struggling to find terms. And according to a poll or a survey that this article was describing, it said that for 1/3 of the respondents, the term elder was the preferred term, preferred to even to senior citizen or older adult or some of those. And so it's beginning to gain a certain resonance and credibility in the culture. I think one thing, if I had my way, one word that I would eliminate from the English language is the word elderly, because the word elderly connotes so many things that are disempowering to older adults. I'd like to get rid of that word. And I think, in my mind, one of the main ways that we can begin to shift our culture's understandings of what elder means and elderhood means is by more and more of us stepping up and actually claiming the role of elder and serving as whole, growing people who are contributing to the community, giving their gifts in whatever way is right, and by providing models of what this can be and not being afraid to let people know that we really are trying our best to serve as elder. That can help to counter a lot of these disempowering images in the media and TV and everywhere where you see older adults as just a bunch of bumbling idiots or people continually in need and not contributing. And what we model, I think, might be the most important thing we can do for help changing the cultural understanding over time.
Is so important. And maybe you can expand, both you and John, of it just seems so crucial that the role of elder be supported and honored in our society, in our modern society. And it really is so different when you think about it from in more of the traditional societies where elders, I think, throughout time have played a more important role. Maybe, John, what are your thoughts? And then Ron, too, on what helps you know it's so crucial that we make this change in our society, in our modern society, here in the 21st century?
Yeah, I tell you what motivates me, if I think about some of the serious problems our country faces, and both we in our dysfunctional government and some of the unfairness because of the economic system that really is causing the very wealthy to get even more wealthy and several people unemployed and not as well off as they were 20 years ago. And those are just two examples. But if I look at that and I say, okay, what can an elder do about that? We have life experience. We have wisdom gained from that experience. We have talent. We have resources to work with. So we have, and there's a growing number of us. There's 10,000 people every day in our country that are 50 years old, and they're the kind of the tail end of the boomer generation. We are a moving body of people who can absolutely make a difference in our country by finding our common voice and taking on these issues, because each one of us individually look at what's going on and we say, we can do better than this. That's what I see is there's a huge need for us to reclaim our elderhood, to take these things on, because we are in the role and the rightful role of protecting our descendants, our great-grandchildren. What we do with our environment today is going to affect 7 generations from now. There's tremendous motivation in my mind for us to want to do this. What does it mean to be a conscious elder? And what is it that our role is to take this thing, to take on what's staring us in the face here? So I don't know if I've answered your question quite right, Dory, but those are I wanted to just point that out. That's what motivates me. And people I talk to, other elders who are in the same situation, of saying, what is it we can do? What can I do? But when we find each other and say, hey, we can work together to really take this on, it's very motivational.
John, I would expand on what you just shared just a little bit, and I would say that when you take a look at the incredible clout that the aging baby boom generation has in government in terms of protecting Social Security and Medicare, politicians won't even touch some of these issues because they know how, as a generation, how much power we have with those issues. Just imagine if we use some of our collective clout grounded in some passion and wholeness to actually advocate for some real life supporting changes in the way our culture works, to advocate for certain environmental or social causes. We could have great power if we believed that we can. And we saw that's an important role for us, for our own well-being and for our world. But we need to believe it. We need to be willing to work together.
Yes. Yeah, and we're talking to each other's choir here a little bit, Ron, but absolutely, I agree. We have tremendous clout if we can find our common voice, not only with if we can say to our politicians, this is what we want for our country. We want a fair, just, safe environment for ourselves and for all of life. We don't want to be a country that is contributing more toward global climate chaos. We want to be the world leader in taking that on. With our buying power, we can make decisions to say, we're not going to buy stuff from companies that don't provide fair wages to their employees. We can decide do we want to eat organic food that's grown by small farmers, local farmers, or do we want to support big business, big agribusiness? I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but there's a lot of things we can do as a people, as a group of people with experience. And this word wisdom, it's a little hard to define who's got wisdom and who doesn't. But I know for myself, I'm wiser now than I was 20 years ago. And I think most people who are in our elderhood bracket would say the same thing. We gain wisdom as we get older, and we can see a broader, more holistic perspective on our culture now than we did when we were maybe in our mid-30s or 40s. So anyway, we're amplifying each other's message here.
Which is what I wanted you to do. And so I have another question to expand it further. For Ron, the book that you're authoring and that's going to be published in October is called Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. And I know from what I've heard from you that it focuses a lot on what we're talking about, conscious eldering and elderhood. Can you elaborate a little on why and how it's relevant for baby boomers, the youngest of whom are turning 50 this year and others in their 60s, and not just people who are truly old or, I know you just said you don't like the term elderly, who are just truly old, let's put it that way, or have more years in their repertoire. So can you, both of you, you start, Ron, with speaking about why this, because many people listening to this call today are probably in the baby boomer and somewhat beyond generation. So speak to that if you would.
Dory, I think it's relevant to baby boomers for several reasons. One is that I think it's really important for baby boomers, many of whom are nearing retirement age. Doesn't mean that all are going to retire. We all know the economic realities these days. But it's relevant to have a vision for the future, a vision that honors that natural dynamic in each of us. Carl Jung and others spoke to it, that when we begin to get into, let's say, maybe the final third of our lives, that there's a natural tendency in us to want to focus more on growth and wholeness, to go within, to develop that spiritual side of us. It's the natural tendency that wants to happen, and it's by honoring that natural drive from within that then, as we age, we can gradually grow more and more into the fullness of what it can be to be an elder. But if we continue to think of ourselves, and today's baby boomers have more opportunities for good health and longer energy, longer times of being productive than ever before, if we continue to think of ourselves as 40-year-olds and to try to hold on to that image of ourselves until we get truly old, then we're denying ourselves the opportunity to begin to do this inner work of refining and working toward wholeness. And I think we all know, I think most everybody on this call is aware that this work of working toward wholeness, of cleaning up the past, getting rid of garbage, changing old unconscious habits that we all have, that work isn't something that you all of a sudden do one day when you become 80 years old and think, okay, I better start focusing on getting conscious. That's work that takes a long time as we're gradually starting to make shifts in ourselves. And it's work that is best done now when we have the energy and time ahead of us to make it really a lifestyle choice to become more conscious and to age more consciously. And the more effectively we're able to do that now, for in our late 50s, 60s, the more we're going to be able to bring that into then those years when we are truly old. And so I think it really is important that we acknowledge that at some point along the way here, and retirement age, I think, is a good point, that we are shifting, at least internally, into a different phase of our lives. And I know I prefer to call that early elderhood. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people are searching for terms for what we call it, but we are moving into a different phase of our lives that requires some different focus, and a lot of that is an inward focus for deepening our growth and deepening our spirituality and getting more and more in touch with that most authentic voice inside of us.
Great. John, do you have any other inputs on that?
I'm looking forward to reading Ron's book. I want to plug Retreat. Help me a little bit, Ron, with your title of it. But
Choosing Conscious Elderhood. Yeah.
Say the title again, Ron.
The title of our retreats, our week-long retreats, is Choosing Conscious Elderhood.
Yeah.
I went on Ron's retreat a year ago at the base of Mount Shasta. Spent a week looking at those issues that Ron mentioned here, looking at past, what still needs to be healed, where is forgiveness needed, where is gratitude needed in terms of expressing that to those that have really been instrumental in our individual past successes and whatever, and what kind of legacy do we want for putting into the future? What are some goals that we want to live our life by? It's a tremendously valuable week, and I would recommend Ron's retreat to anyone who is listening and hasn't been on it. But that work, that inner work, is so valuable and so necessary, and we don't really, not having started it, it's hard to imagine what is this that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Once you get into it, you realize how important it is. And I have to say that from my point of view, I'll probably go to at least one retreat every year from now on, just because there's always more to learn. And that really helps balance. I spend most of my time doing outer work. That's my calling right now. But I know that every once in a while I have to stop and spend some time and saying, hey, I'm getting off track here. I'm starting to pose enemies out there, or I'm doing that adding up to what I've committed myself to do. It becomes a way of life that is different from when I was working as an engineer or a manager. I didn't have time, or didn't think I had time for these kinds of things, and now I do have time for that, and it's an absolute blessing to be at this point in life and being able to do these things, both the inner work while we're doing the outer work. All I can say is underline what Ron just said. It's really very fulfilling.
And we're going to shift in a little bit to the outer work, but I want to stay a little bit more, and maybe Ron, you could speak a little more to some of the terms that I think many of us know, and you will get some information on the retreat too. I haven't had the opportunity yet to do it, and I'm trying to figure out if I can do it this year or it may have to wait another year. I'm not sure. But there are ways, in addition, of thinking about kind of life review and our timelines and legacy and even living our legacy now in terms of choices we make. I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about that inner work that I think you've articulated a lot of it so beautifully already, and it sounds like in your book you're going to be talking more about it too, and
yes,
the
very
retreat
much
leads people to it. But can you share for the people listening how one would go about doing that? And I think we have a sense of why it's so important, but maybe just a little bit more of what's involved in that process.
I think, Dory, that maybe the umbrella term for how one can best approach this work is life review, because the whole process of life review done very mindfully and carefully really does help to touch on various of these important other aspects of inner work. And there are a lot of ways to do life review, and all one has to do is go then Google life review, and you'll find lots of good material. I won't go into specific ways to do it, but as we review our lives, and we really look consciously at the lives we've lived and who we have become up to this point, most of us see that there are areas where our energy is stuck. There are areas where we're somehow stuck in the past, keeping us from moving forward. There is forgiveness that needs to happen that hasn't happened, resentments that we may carry, grief that we haven't processed, old stories that we tell ourselves. That we all have experiences that kind of lead to stories that exist in most of us of how we're unworthy, or undeserving, or deeply flawed. I think most of us have some versions of these. And to the extent that we can begin to get in touch with these and transform those, and most of us have regrets. I know in our retreats, a lot of people talk about regrets they have that really just keep them stuck in the past. And yet, I would say that conscious eldering work is deeply spiritual work, not just psychological. Deeply spiritual in that the more I and others who do this work get in touch with that spiritual dimension in themselves, however they understand it, whatever terms they use, the more you come to see that our lives aren't just a series of events, but from the eagle's eye view, from the soul's perspective. I like to use the word soul, use whatever term you want. From this larger perspective, our lives really are heroes' journeys. They're opportunities for us to use all of our experiences, all of our mistakes, all of our woundings, all of our difficult experiences, as well as our positive experiences, as vehicles for growth. And I think the more we're able to get in touch with that larger perspective through the spiritual dimensions of this inner work, the more we can then look at the woundings in our lives or the errors we've made or a lot of these things and start to redefine them, not as woundings or screw-ups or whatever, but rather this was an opportunity for me to grow and learn. Or it can be if I haven't used it in that way yet. And the more we can look at our whole life as this opportunity for learning and growing, then we see, hey, we're at this point now where we have an incredible array of experiences that have all contributed to our growth. And we could tap into all of this and see how we've learned from it, because that's the essence of the wisdom that we could then bring forth in whatever way we can serve as conscious elders.
Excellent point. John, any additions, thoughts?
I think Ron described it quite well. I don't have anything else to add to what Ron said. I think he's done a great job.
So I want to shift it a little to this notion of the importance of legacy in this kind of conscious aging, conscious eldering, and would be interested in your thoughts on when we have a lot of years ahead, how does one get in touch with legacy? And I'm remembered, if I remember this quote, I think it was Mark Friedman had said, I think it was at the Positive Aging Conference, where he said, "We don't want to just leave a legacy, we want to live our legacy." And so I wanted to shift a little to that, because I think it's going to move us a little bit more to some of the outward work that John is involved in. I want to be able to focus on that too. But I'd love kind of your thoughts on the importance of legacy, but also I hear from so many people that many of us want to make a contribution to the world as we age. And there's a tension of how do you live life fully and give back, but also savor, slow down, savor life, spend time with family and friends, and be reflective. I wonder if you could speak a little to ways you found that people deal with this tension of living life and savoring life and giving back to life.
I think that's a great question, Dory. I think one thing that's really important is that as we age, we come to recognize that our legacy isn't something that has been created, and that basically our legacy building is done. We have created part of our legacy so far. We've had an impact on the world so far up to this point in our lives, and hopefully it's been primarily positive. But recognizing we still have a lot of legacy to create just helps to shift our mindset to realize that our lives are relevant. We can still have a real impact on others and make a difference in this world, leave a mark, which is what I think legacy is. But to respond to your question about really savoring life versus out there, creating legacy by serving, it seems to me that it's up to each of us to find that balance that is right for us. But to first acknowledge that this balance is important. It is important to find it. And that as elders, we need to approach our service, what we give to the world, in a different way than we were when we were younger people. And when we were younger people, for a lot of us, it came from a place of, I don't mean to say this in any demeaning way, but like an ego need to make a mark, to make a difference. And we were being led by that ego part in us to really do what we do. And as conscious elders, most of those conscious elders I know, who I truly admire as models, are people who, as they age, their service comes less and less from the ego or personality self, and more from being guided by that deepest soul voice or voice of spirit within them as to how they can best serve, how they can best make a difference. And that when you're in touch with that soul voice in you, then there's going to be a lot less sense of striving or burning oneself out in service, but rather going to be in touch with how can I honor this calling to give my gifts in such and such a way, but how can I do that in a way where I'm coming from as much wholeness as possible? And that wholeness really involves taking the time to savor and enjoy life and not come from a driven place. So the conscious elders I know who are making a difference out in the world are making a big difference, but they're not driven and they're not burning themselves out. It's like they're honoring their own natural knowing of how to do this in a way that honors my own growth and wholeness, as well as enabling me to make the difference that I can possibly make.
Such an excellent point. And I just want to comment, Karen from Minneapolis has just wanted to comment on just how beautifully this has been expressed. And she comments and says, we all have a tendency, which is maybe either more inner or more outer activism, and needing to be aware of the dynamic tension between both so that we can honor both.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a beautiful comment, Karen. So why don't you, I think it would be helpful to talk a little about now the Conscious Elder Network and also the Conscious Aging Alliance. So, John, can you just tell how the Conscious Elder Network got started and what it's about? Because many people on the call may actually be very interested in being part of it.
Thank you, Dory, and I'd be glad to talk about that a little bit. I sold my business in 2005 after running it for 20 years and realized at the time that I really needed to do some inner work because I was spiritually dead. And I had that, and it was because I was burned out from just being totally focused on running a business for 20 years. It was Silicon Valley, and the model at Silicon Valley is work hard, play hard. And it's pretty much driven just the way the culture is of Silicon Valley. I started on an inner journey of both healing old wounds and then really looking at what did I want to do with the rest of my life. And through a series of retreats and personal work, I came to the realization that I wanted to work with elders who are seeking to make a difference and giving it back in some way. And I also experienced this strong realization that, as many of us do, that our country is in serious trouble with a dysfunctional government and an environment that is seriously being threatened in its ability to sustain life, and really an unfair social culture. And so I put these two together, and with many other elders' encouragement and support, I launched this Conscious Elders Project in March of 2003 that goes now by the name of Conscious Elders Network. What we are about, and it is pulling together elders who want to be social or environmental activists, taking on these issues, both however we would work locally in our own communities, but also on a national basis. And it's what I referred to earlier, and Ron also, is that we elders, the large number of us, we have tremendous clout, or we can, by getting ourselves together and agreeing on finding our common voice, we can absolutely make a difference. And that's really the point of Conscious Elderhood, the Conscious Elders Network, is each one of us is pulled to some aspect of activism, social activism, which we do. So we have several different groups that are being formed, some focused on the environment, some focused on some aspect of social activism, social justice, if you will. And so we focus on the issues of the day, but we're also looking for what is it that we want to evolve to as a culture. How do we want to be different? If we could change our culture in some way to some new way of being more just, more, caring, if you will, what would that be? And so there's two aspects of it. We're working on the issues of the day, but we're looking forward to how do we evolve toward a future that would be in support of life. I'll put it that way. And we do this both in an activist outer way and we're also continuing to explore this idea of being spiritual people. There was the inner work that Ron talked about. It's more than psychological. It's a spiritual calling that we are cultivating in ourselves and each other. And the whole idea is to work together. And we call it a network because it's not just us doing our thing. We want to really network with other organizations of like mind, and including the Conscious Aging Alliance, which Ron has started, and I'll let Ron deal with that one, but I hear about that. But Ron and I are natural partners here in this, that he's focused on the Conscious Aging Alliance, which is primarily organizations that provide inner work or help people develop their inner work, and the Conscious Elders Network is primarily an outer-oriented one, trying to get us all working together on the social and environmental activism opportunities that are many in our country and actually worldwide. I don't know. What else could I say, Dory? There's a lot of detail to this, but start.
No, that's a wonderful start. And let me just shift a little to Ron from your viewpoint. Can you tell people about the Conscious Aging Alliance and from your vantage point, how that came about, and maybe a little of your own movement in that, and then again from your perspective, the working together with that inner and outer, your work, the Conscious Aging Alliance, with John's work, the Conscious Elder Network.
Yeah, Dory, about 3 years ago, I began to become aware as I guess I'm pretty much a natural networker, and I began to learn about various individuals and organizations, each in their own unique and diverse ways, trying to help promote the development of conscious elders and focused on inner work. And I realized that so many of these organizations, mostly small, including my Center for Conscious Eldering, are off working in our own little corner of the woods, oftentimes feeling rather lonely and isolated. And it became clear to me that if we're ever going to really create a paradigm shift in how aging is viewed, we need a whole lot of collaboration and synergy. And so I began to gather together some of these organizations that I'm aware of, and there's certainly a lot of small organizations I'm not aware of, but those that I'm aware of focused on this inner work into an alliance whose purpose would be to get to know each other, to help support each other by cross-promoting our events and the kind of work we do, and using the power of synergy to help make a difference for each of our organizations and for this whole conscious aging or conscious eldering movement. And people want to work together. I think the age of competition is giving way to an age of collaboration, and these organizations really want to support each other. And so we've got Saging International, based on the wonderful work of the late Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who most of us know passed recently, and my Center for Conscious Eldering and the Institute of Noetic Sciences has a really excellent new conscious aging program, and Spirituality and Practice has a conscious aging component now, and 8 other good organizations. And we're doing our best to learn from each other and to grow together. But one thing I've come to realize, and John's really helped me with this, thank you, John, is that you can help people get more and more in touch with their real sense of calling and purpose and passion for serving as an elder. But if you're not helping them to gain access to information and opportunities to give their gifts in our culture in meaningful ways, you're just setting them up for frustration. And what John and his Conscious Elders Network is doing is helping to create more visibility and opportunity for those of us who are aging consciously to be able to go and give our gifts in meaningful ways that make a difference. And so I think there's such a beautiful blending of the inner and the outer approaches as our 2 networks begin to find ways to support each other and to grow together.
Great. And before, it makes me think of a couple of other questions I want to ask, but can you mention, because I think it relates to this, Ron, your notion about aiming high, because I think it is part of that, maybe that cusp of the inner outer. Can you talk about your notion of aiming high as we age, rather than aiming low or not aiming at all?
I think that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And I begin my book with the quote attributed to Michelangelo: "The greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and we miss, but that we aim too low and we make it." And I think that one quote really encapsulates what conscious eldering is about: aiming with intentionality as we get older, shooting for our best. Maybe we're going to aim a little higher than we can actually reach. But we have all heard from